more paper by making the type font even smaller.
Good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting for September 11th, 2017 back to order. We started tonight's meeting in executive session where we discussed negotiations on a property, Judah Eldridge property out in East Harwich. The board did vote to continue discussion on that and to pursue that. We also discussed 4 Central Ave, and the board did vote for Chris to enter into negotiations on that as well. So with that, I'm informing you that we will be video, audio taping, as well as live broadcasting this meeting. And in addition, anyone in the audience wishing to video or audio tape must notify the chairman now. Hearing no one, will you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start tonight's meeting with a moment of silence in remembrance of all who lost their lives on 9/11, September 11th, 2001, as well as everyone else that was affected by September 11th, 2001. Thank you. Anyone for weekly briefing?
Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director. I know this is in your weekly report, but I just wanted to draw attention to a few programs that we're doing. The first one is Honoring the Stories, the Power of Writing. It's a grief support group for anyone. The flyers are on our website, and you can certainly call the Community Center. The next one we're really excited about, we're working with police and fire, highway, Chamber of Commerce, local businesses, the Recreation Department, and we're doing the first Touch-A-Truck in the Community Center parking lot. That is on October 14th. And the last one is
Carolyn, can you explain Touch-A-Truck?
I can certainly explain it. The police, fire, highway, some of the local businesses bring over some large, beautiful trucks, like a fire engine, so that the kids and the adult kids can get to touch and learn about and climb on gently the apparatus. It's usually a great success. They're excited to see it, and we're excited to work with the community and the chamber. So that will be in the parking lot. There will be an ice cream truck. Might be my favorite, but no, the fire, definitely. And police. So it's just a free event to invite the community to come on over. So that'll be in our parking lot on the recreation side of the building.
Great.
And the one of the ones I wanted to announce was our boutique, which is where we collect gently used costumes. The definition of gently used is on the back of the flyer. We will collect those, and then we will have on October 20th a free event for anyone who needs a costume. They can get kind of costly for people, so kids outgrow them or they don't want to be the same thing, or so people drop them off to us and we open it up to the public, and they come in and pick out their costume that they want so that then they can come trick-or-treat at the community center.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else for weekly briefing? Public comment? Oh, she's running.
I just set my own camera shot, excuse me. Far out. Just in case anybody missed the September 11th ceremony this morning, I filmed it. It will be broadcast on the station for the rest of the week. It's also on YouTube. If you missed the Jailhouse Barbecue, the Cultural Center Craft Fair, Beach Day, those are also available for you to watch on YouTube as well, and will be airing on the station all through this weekend.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Public comment and announcement.
Hello, I'm Ed McManus, president of the Harwich Cranberry Festival, and I'm just here to remind you that this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is the festival, and also remind you that this year we're moving up the street to behind the community center, where the crafts fair, the music concert, the food court and picnic area and beer garden and the viewing area for the fireworks show on Saturday night will occur. I think it's Also, this year, in the community center on Saturday, the Chamber of Commerce is hosting a home and business expo to highlight some of our local businesses. And I think that and their help and their sponsorship of the fireworks exhibit at the end of the Saturday is a great thing of getting a couple of stalwart town organizations working together to put on a good show for the town. So I invite you all to come, and I hope you enjoy yourself.
Thank you. Where can people get a schedule of times, start times for everything?
Well, it'll be coming out in the newspaper, the Chronicle, or they can go on our website, which is harwichcranberryfestival.org.
As well as the Chamber of Commerce?
Yep.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else for public comment and announcement? I get a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move the following. Approved minutes, August 21st, 2017, regular session. April 3rd, 2017, executive session. Approved minutes, July 24th, 2017, executive session. Also approved the minutes, September 5th, 2017, executive session. B, approved Chapter 90 project request for paving of various roads. And C, approved Ginger Plum Lane betterment assessment be levied in accordance with order.
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
An abstention.
You can, but you don't necessarily have to if you're not there.
Okay. Next up, public hearings and presentations. First public hearing is the proposed fee amendment to Harbor Management Plan, Appendix B, Marine Fee Schedule. John?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Rendon, Harbor Master, and I'm here before you to propose.
Mr. Chairman, should I open this meeting
Yes,
as a
sorry.
public hearing?
We're going to open the public.
Sure.
Go ahead.
John, just let me do this officially. I'd like to open the notice of public hearing. The Harwich Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on September 11th, 2017, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room located at Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, for the purpose of reviewing proposed fee amendments to the Harbor Management Plan, Appendix B, Marine Fee Schedule. All members of the public having an interest in this topic are cordially invited to attend the public hearing and provide information and testimony relevant to this issue. Signed by each of us as Board of Selectmen.
Great. Good catch, Larry. Thank you. John?
Yes, sir. So what I've put in your packet is essentially Appendix B, and highlighted in yellow are the fees that are being addressed with an increase. You see there lined out in blue what the current fee is, and in red is what the proposed fee is. And so really what I'm proposing is a 10% increase pretty much across the board. There are some, as you see in Appendix B, that I am not increasing, and mainly because they're been established relatively recently, and I didn't think that it was appropriate to propose a fee increase if the fee had been recently addressed. I also didn't address ramp fees. Fees are really controlled by the state because we have public access facilities, and I wanted to leave those alone at this point instead of requesting through the state to increase fees. So you've heard me say for a couple of years now that we would be increasing fees once we got our marina project going. All of our users for the last couple of years have been told in renewal letters that fee increases would be coming. So it's not a surprise to, I don't think, any of our slip holders or mooring permit holders. And I think it's a fair, not too much of a fee increase. The last fee increase we had really was in 2009. In 2012, before I got here, there was a change from square foot to linear foot. And so that change did affect some. Some went up, some went down. but, you know, the straight across the board fee increase for the marina hasn't been done since 2009. What I've done here, obviously the two major areas where fees are affected are slip permits and our mooring permits. So what I have in your packet and what Jamie has put up is just a comparison. We did a survey of neighboring towns and some off Cape, just to give you a comparison of where we are currently. In blue is what our fee is currently without the increase, compared to the other towns, what their current fee is. So we're slightly below average when you look at the mooring comparison. And as with anything, you know, it's not just a straight across comparison. Some towns, you know, don't have a whole lot of moorings, and, you know, some have 3-4 times as many as us, like Chatham, and so, but you do the best you can in getting comparison on what the fees are of other towns. And then there you see the dockage comparison for those that have town marinas, town dockage that's not compared to private commercial marinas. So that's all based upon town. So again, we are slightly below the average there. So the increases that I'm proposing will bring us closer to that average. I don't think we should be on the high end, but I also don't think we should be at the low end. So that's what we're trying to capture. And then there are other fee increases besides, as you see, besides the slip and mooring. Pretty much across the board, we're talking our transient rates. Again, I did a 10% increase on those. Our offloading permits, again, 10% increase. So, you know, for example, a Class A permit, which is a commercial fishing permit, that's what all our year-round commercial permits, our fishing boats pay to offload. $50 is a current fee. It's going up to $55. So I don't think you want me to go line by line. I think you have them. Two things that I'd like to highlight on the third page of Appendix B. You see winter storage has been lined out based upon my presentation before the board a month ago or so. We addressed winter boat storage, and it was decided to not offer that, so that has been lined out. That fee has been lined out, and then the only other piece that will be taken out of the harbor management plan is the definition. So in section 2 of the harbor management plan, it talks about the definition of winter boat storage and what the dates are, so that is being pulled out.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
And then the other thing I want to highlight is replacement permit sticker pass, $5. That's a new fee that I'm recommending and requesting your approval for. We spend quite a bit of money on our stickers that we put on vehicles and trailers, you know, to show people have permits and boats. And more people are losing their permits, and it costs money. So we're going to charge a $5 fee if they need to get a new one. And that's what I'm asking, you know, your approval for. So in summary, kind of just to, you know, as we talked about leading up to town meeting and how we're going to pay for the marina project, we talked about several elements that we identified that we were going to put towards paying the debt service. One of those was this fee increase. And so just on a very conservative estimate, and the estimate was based upon the slip minimum calculation. So, you know, when you have a 20-foot slip, you can have boats up to 24 feet in length in that category. 30 foot, you can have up to 34, and so forth. And so when we did our estimate based upon the new fee increase, we're estimating about $160,000 that is going to be towards putting, that would go towards the debt service on the marina project. And that's just one piece of it. We talked about taking some out of the mooring account, the waterway user fee account, and so forth. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, John. Sure. Anyone in the public wish to speak on this? Okay, the board. Don, you're all set? Janelle?
John, I'm just curious about that 160,000. Is that just in the first year, or is that over the life of a certain amount of time?
That will be in 1 year. So when we redo the rates, and we're getting ready to send out our notices, October 15th is the renewal notices go out. So start of the next season with the new fees, will generate about $160,000 on top of what we're bringing in now.
Thank you.
Larry?
John and Chris, just so I understand the mechanism of it, we created the user fee a while ago, and that went into one of the 41 or one of the spatial funds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I think we were told that we couldn't use money from the fees we had to go into that fund because they were dedicated. But this increase will go into that, is what you're saying. Is that correct?
That's the way we
works?
proposed it, and it was approved going into town meeting. These new revenues and the way that Fund 1626 was created
I'm
was...
happy you remember the number.
I do, yes, sir. I watch it. Is that new revenue could be put into that account
Okay.
to dedicate it to
Yeah.
waterways improvements.
Excellent. I was just trying to understand, because that was a big discussion a couple of years ago with what we could put in and what not.
Right. Right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Larry, that we had told, I think John and I, when we had presented the plan to the board, had said that we would get 75% of the revenue for this on the water side, and this is part of that obligation. We knew that 10% fee increase was needed, so that's all part of the plan that was adopted by the board 2 years ago.
Julie?
No, I think it looks good. It looks like it's bringing us more in line with other towns, so
Yes, ma'am.
good.
A motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I get a motion to approve the fee increase? Or a fee change?
So moved.
Do we have to put with the, in the new replacement sticker though, maybe make detail to that? I'll make a
In
motion.
accordance with the
Yeah, go ahead and make a motion.
submission.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the proposed harbor fee increases, including the new fee for a replacement sticker permit pass.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
Thank you
Julie.
very much, sir.
Okay, next up, old business. We'll start the night off with the marijuana. Last week, we had the attorney before us, and he gave us a solid overview of what we'll have to do if we, either way, whether we approve or don't approve this. Because either way, it has to go to planning board, and there's a lot of work to be done, I thought I'd just bring it back this week instead of waiting. We have invited the police chief and the fire chief here to speak as well. So I think the first part of this conversation will be the board deciding if the board supports or doesn't support the sale of marijuana in the town. Chris, do you want to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did provide, actually, the attorney obviously had to rewrite what we had summarized, but we put in there that basically there's three options, and I'm glad tonight there's an opportunity to have a discussion about what those options and the impact of those mean. But the option one is to prohibit sales, and to do that, we would need a zoning bylaw that would require 2/3 vote at town meeting. So that is something town council would also have to prepare a general bylaw to do that. There was some question raised about what happens if one passes and the other. The answer we got back is we don't know yet. It's still up in the air. Option two is to allow, I should point out, a zoning bylaw, the 2/3 vote is a higher standard that would be required than a general bylaw. Option two is that the town could allow for the sale of marijuana by right with limitations by a special permit. This would be require a zoning bylaw, so once again, a 2/3 requirement. And we could, under that zoning amendment, this is something that we would have planning board do, either option one or option two, that they would have to be engaged in this to prepare the language, because there's zoning bylaws to limit the location of retail marijuana to specific locations in town. They did use a standard of the number of liquor licenses, retail package, so we did provide in there that there's 10, so 20% of that would mean roughly 2 establishments could be allowed under that provision. And then the recommendation would be the zoning amendment would be a by right or by special permit. I think by special permit probably makes more sense, because then that gives the approach that you can look at the individual elements. And then any establishment that comes into the community, we would be obligated to execute a host community agreement that is between the board and the establishment. The max on that would be up to 3% of their revenue. And then also, if the town wanted to have the sale of marijuana, it would be 3% added on to, similar to how the hotel and motel tax works, so up to 3%. And the new Cannabis Control Commission has timelines in which they'll be issuing regulations by March of 2018. The third option here, which I didn't think we had a good element, is if nothing happens, if we don't go to town meeting, no action is taken whatsoever, then it would be allowed, the sale of marijuana would be allowed within the community, and the retail sales, wherever retail sales is allowed, it would be allowed by right. That does have an element too where they, in certain districts, IL district, they would have to use a special permit in order to get that. And the host agreement does still kick in and under that. So if someone were to come in, if we didn't, as an example, if there was a decision to do nothing, that doing the local acceptance on the 3% sales would probably make sense to do. So there's a few steps that need to be done from a zoning perspective, from a host perspective, and from a tax perspective. So I think that even the do-nothing option, it means we should do some things, just to be prepared. But I wanted to kind of at least do the three basic options. But I think, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, the core message here is, the town voted, albeit fairly close, to support not having marijuana sales. And what is the ramification of, I think the first question is, do we want to be in the business or not, to your point? Thank you.
So John Giorgio confirmed to me today that the general bylaw that some people are following is the Attorney General has come back and issued, she's approved them, but she's come back and said, but it is a land use bylaw, so she's recommending that each town go back and get a zoning bylaw anyway. So the way I see it is, we need a general bylaw, we need a zoning bylaw, and then I think we almost need a backup zoning bylaw for a time, place, and manner in case town meeting doesn't approve the zoning bylaw prohibiting it. So we really need to go to town meeting with a second bylaw and have planning board do their homework, just in case, because if we only lost this vote by, the town voted 459 votes was the only difference out of 4,500 voters against versus 4,000 and change for. So that's not a 2/3 vote that's going to change a zoning bylaw. So we almost need a change. We need a second bylaw to go to town meeting with.
I'm here just to provide some information. As some of you know, I sit on a policy committee of the MMA, and I'm also clerk of the Selectmen and Councilors Association, and I just wanted to let you know that at our October meeting of the Selectmen's Association, the MMA staff, who has been representing towns and cities with the legislature and the Attorney General on the rewrite of the law, will be down to present their information and information on how other towns are approaching this in the Commonwealth, and then there'll be two additional speakers who are involved in the different sides of how towns could adopt or not adopt this, and I think it would be probably a good venue to get a good overview on what your options are.
Great, thank you, Ed. So with all the pre-information, I guess we'll start maybe with the police chief and kind of get his thoughts on what he thinks of the sale of marijuana in the town of Harwich.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I mentioned to Chris when he said I was on the agenda that he said, well, I imagine they're going to know which side I'm going to come down on. So I just want to lay it right out there that I am biased. But it's not for the wrong reasons. I invited some backup this evening. I have Detective Sergeant Brackett. How many years you have on now, Bobby? I'm trying to do some, 24, okay, so I have 30, and Chief Clark has 40. So what's that? That's
bunch.
close to 100 years of public safety experience, standing before you and seeing the good, the bad, the ugly related to the drug issue has a tendency to make you biased. Let's start with that. I just have 3 bullets that, and I guess one other comment. I'm biased, but I don't consider myself misinformed. I've done a degree of research on this, albeit a lot of it comes from Kevin Sabat and his great group, SAM, which Smart Approaches to Marijuana. I heard him speak at the Cape Codder last spring. Extremely informative gentleman, and he made an awful lot of sense. And I'm going to be attending another conference up in Maynard at the State Police Fusion Center about legalization impacts on communities. But this is a rather critical decision you have before you. And one of the things I would offer, Mr. Chairman, about the 3/4 vote and the zoning issue is that vote, the ballot vote for legalization, though it was close, that was for legalization. It wasn't within the town of Harwich for retail sales. And that's one of the things that I hope to impart tonight is that legalization ship has sailed. There's no question about it. And as a result of that, our public safety agencies are probably going to experience an impact. But I think if you bring retail marijuana sales to the community, it's going to get worse. So with that being said, the 3 bullets, I think it's going to have a negative impact on the youth of our community, which is what I think is the most important point you need to take home tonight. Negative impact on the community itself, and a negative impact on public safety. So again, the legalization issue, the medical marijuana issue, yes, that's done, over and done with. But if retail sales come into the community, tell me that the youth of the community aren't going to get hold of it more easily. They're going to get hold of it more easily. And I can give you a local example. This past June, we had a 15-year-old girl from Harwich consume cherry lemonade cannabis-laced beverage, okay, at a location in Harwich. The ambulance was called. She was, in no uncertain terms, bugging out, okay, very adverse reaction, transported to the hospital. That was a legitimate cannabis beverage purchased at a medical marijuana facility that was diverted to that girl and some other youth who were sipping on it that night as well. So there's a local example for you, okay? Did you know that the industry, and Dr. Sabat definitely believes in this, the marijuana industry targets youth. They have edible gummy bears, the beverage that I just cited, cookies, brownies, Rice Krispie treats, chocolate, lollipops, okay? Is that an adult type thing, do you think? No, they want to target the youth because that's where the customers are. Okay, so just be aware of that. We're not talking just about the leafy marijuana substance. We're talking about edibles, and edibles can be extremely dangerous, as that 15-year-old girl found out. That had 100 milligrams of THC in it, which I guess is a lot. And some of these edibles can be as much as 95% THC. The leafy marijuana that's available these days is about 15. The marijuana of my generation, the baby boomer generation, 1%, okay? And by the way, the medical community has no idea what long-term exposure to products of like a purity of 95% THC will do. That's like a hardcore drug, 95% THC, okay? Again, we look to a lot of our studies out of Colorado, okay, and their indications are that, you're talking about youth. 13 to 21 years of age, over the time that medical marijuana and recreational marijuana came in Colorado, their emergency room visits for marijuana-related stuff quadrupled. Okay, so there's an impact there. The adolescent brain, okay, isn't fully developed until you're about 25. So you're much more susceptible to the adverse effects of marijuana. It actually predisposes you to addiction. And that's a scientific fact. Okay, so what are we trying to accomplish here? We know that our youth are going to get hold of this stuff. If retail marijuana comes into town, it's going to be prevalent, and it's going to be available, and it's going to be diverted. There's no question about it. Colorado right now has 56% higher marijuana usage than the national average. Okay? So again, I understand it's legal, but if you shrink that down and compare, okay, so other communities that don't have retail, Harwich has retail, where is it going to be more prevalent? It's going to be more prevalent in Harwich. During one of the documents I read, it talked about a youth eating a THC-laced cookie and then leaping from a balcony to his death. Okay, so it's true that we don't have overdoses of marijuana that lead to, instant death like heroin, but it can result in death, absolutely. I just have a quick quote for an MD here, the American Academy of Pediatrics. And he says, "We know marijuana can be very harmful to adolescent health and development. Making it more available to adults, even if restrictions are in place, will increase the access for teens. Just the campaigns to legalize marijuana can have the effect of persuading adolescents that marijuana is not dangerous, which can have a devastating impact on their lifelong health and development. For adolescents, marijuana can impair memory concentration, interfering with learning, and is linked to lower odds of completing high school or obtaining a college degree. It can alter motor control, coordination, and judgment, which may contribute to unintentional deaths and injuries. Regular use is also linked to psychological problems, poorer lung health, and a higher likelihood of drug dependence in adulthood." That's an MD. So I guess the question I leave you with my first bullet is, are we willing to risk the future of our country, actually? You hear the youth of our country is our future, right? Are we willing to risk our youth or accept the death, a single death of a youth, for a potential revenue stream? Negative impact on the community. And again, yes, I point to the fact that the community voted against legalizing it, okay? True, it was a close margin, but we weren't talking about retail sales. They were talking about legalization. And I want you to picture this. I polled a few of the police chiefs around us. It seems like every single community is planning on, that I spoke to, around us, has an intention or already has things in place that will ban retail sales. Okay? So if we sit in the middle and we allow retail sales, what is going to happen? We're going to become the distribution hub of recreational marijuana for this part of the Cape. That concerns me. Harwich this is a beautiful community. It's family-oriented, it's seaside, it has an awful lot to offer. What are we trying to accomplish by allowing retail sales in here? Do you want to see a big marijuana sign in downtown Harwichport? I know I may be going over the top here a little bit. We're talking about zoning issues and everything later, right? But I think we need to picture what potentially could happen if this was allowed in here. Study out of California, your average medicinal marijuana user, okay, is a 32-year-old male with a history of alcohol and drug abuse. That's your average medicinal marijuana user. I don't anticipate that your average recreational marijuana user has a much better resume, okay? But we are going to draw these into our community if we're the only community that has a retail operation going on, one or two, okay? And just one more quote for the evening. I came across this in one of the journals A recent report conducted by Visit Denver, the marketing organization for the city, found that as of 2014, nearly 50% of meeting planners negatively commented on homeless, youth, panhandling, safety, cleanliness, and drugs, including public marijuana consumption. The report went on to say that Denver is losing visitors and valuable convention business as a result of these overall safety perception issues. So there's an example of Denver suffering, their business districts suffering financial losses. And I present to you that the same will happen here if you allow retail marijuana into town. Okay, it could negatively impact businesses that already exist that attract families and children and retirees and business people who don't want to be around marijuana. Okay, if marijuana comes in, they will go somewhere else. One of the other interesting issues about retail marijuana is because it's still a Schedule I federally prohibited drug, they can't do any banking business. It's all cash. And that creates a concern, a security concern for us. It's a very, interesting target and potentially could lead to, violent crime. My last bullet. Negative impact on public safety. To think that illegal distribution will go away is wrong. I can cite a local example, and Detective Sergeant Brackett is intimately aware of this. We had a neighborhood, I won't say where, complaining of extremely high levels of motor vehicle traffic and what they suspected to be drug dealing going on. Our patrol investigator did an outstanding job working with our officer assigned to the Cape Cod Drug Task Force and some other officers. They surveilled the area, and they determined that it was a young man who had a medical marijuana card, but he was using the card to purchase the marijuana, then bring it back and sell it to all his friends and customers. And that's what was creating the havoc on the street. It was a very lengthy investigation because at the time, medical marijuana obviously was legal. So it becomes a question of how much time do we put in on this case? But luckily, Detective Sergeant Brackett, Pete Patel, Officer Vermette, all realized it was worth it. And in the end, in the culmination of the investigation, they recovered several pounds of marijuana and close to 2 pounds of psilocybin mushrooms, which is a Class C drug. And that's the other issue with this. A lot of the times, your major marijuana dealers are not just dealing marijuana, right? So you're potentially providing a haven for drug traffickers who are moving harsher drugs. I think we'll see an influx of drug-related calls in town if retail comes in. Disturbances, drug-related crashes. You have more users and purchasers in town. They're driving on our roads, and they're most likely going to be under the influence of whatever they purchase. And that's going to create increased crashes and increased problems. And just as a side note, Detective Sergeant Brackett reminded me this evening, we had a shooting last week. One of the first ones since I've been here, obviously, quite surprising. It was a legitimate shooting. A car had a bullet hole in it. And we arrested 2 people immediately. It was excellent work. But that was over an ounce of marijuana. Drug-related medical calls will increase. I don't want to steal Chief Clark's thunder, but Colorado saw a 153% increase in marijuana poisoning calls ages 0 to 5 years old. Okay? Again, your gummy bears, your Rice Krispie treats, right? Edibles, it's very hard to tell the difference. Fire calls increased. The risk of a fire in a grow house is increased by about 40% from what I could see. And you can have explosions because now they're trying to extract THC from the plants using things like butane, which are extremely flammable and explosive, and other, high amperage lights and electricity Sometimes trying to divert electricity off meters so you don't have to pay for it causes a spark, causes an explosion, causes a fire. There's another local example. We had, I'm not sure when that was, Norm, when was that fire related to the marijuana grow? About a year ago. Generator that was running the grow lights caught fire, caught the garage, and the house went up. Do you think we will see less of that if we allow retail marijuana in town? The answer is no. And I guess my final point, you know, we're still in the throes of an opioid crisis here that public safety is trying to deal with. We lost 6 people over the last 2.5 years and had dozens and dozens of overdose victims who survived. To me, it is completely and utterly counterintuitive to try and make another mind-altering substance more available when we're still trying to deal with saving lives of people who are overdosing on heroin. You know, this is one final thought, and I'll let Chief Clark come up. Do you think the marijuana industry wants to come into town out of some altruistic, there you go, sense of providing a wholesome public service to the community, or are they doing it for the money? And I think our mission as public safety servants and public servants, all of us, is to first not consider the money, it's to consider the health and well-being and safety of the people who live in this community, especially our young people. And they're the ones that are going to get hold of it. So I would urge you to consider that and to do the right thing and to support prohibiting retail sales. Let Chief Clark say a few words.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, there's very little I can add to Chief Gilmet's words. He was eloquent and to the point, and I assure you, Chief Gilmet and Detective Sergeant Brackett know their business, without a doubt. As a society, I see us, we're poisoning ourselves. I see this as, for many people, they look at it as a me issue or an I issue. I don't. It's a we issue. And that's how we need to look at this. As the chief said, we have had at least 2 fires recently as a direct result of grow operations. I've been doing this a long time, and there's always a relation. They try and make a relationship with this and alcohol. Well, I've been doing this a long time. I've never been to a still fire. So we're trying to grow the stuff ourselves, and it's a completely different thing than alcohol or tobacco. It's different. The chief and I share just general public safety concerns. Mr. Chairman, this is a really bad idea. And I hope this board will stand up and do what the right thing is and say, no, not in our community. I don't know of any place where you can go and find a beer brownie or a whiskey gummy. But as the chief said, marijuana is found. They've gotten very good at, as a society, we're also very clever. We've been able to hide this stuff, market this stuff, and to the chief's point, our youth are going to suffer. They're going to suffer. Revenue stream. I find it so interesting that we would even utter those words about something like marijuana as a revenue stream. Mr. Chairman, if I came before this board and suggested parking meters, you'd throw me out. Studies in the state of Washington and in Colorado have shown a high percentage, 30 to 50% more fatal marijuana-related accidents in those 2 states. They've done their research. And many of those were young people. Our parents and our teachers have enough already to do to try and control the use of tobacco with our youth and alcohol. Not to mention the opiates. But the tobacco and the alcohol with our youth is an issue. On a personal note, my daughter lives in Plymouth. and actually works for Gosnell, so I think this is true to my heart. And she lives in an apartment complex with 6 apartments. One of those apartments, the gentleman smokes marijuana. And to be to the point, the whole building stinks. It smells. Because going back to the I or the me, it's more important for the I or the me to care about what everybody else in this apartment complex thinks. And that's going to get worse, too. So I would hope you'll listen to your professionals tonight. And I know that you'll have arguments on the other side. I respect that. But I truly believe for Harwich, this is just a really bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, Bud Brackett, Detective Sergeant of the Harwich Police Department. I just touch on a few things that haven't been touched on as of yet. And the big thing I think people need to take into consideration is, what do we have to gain from it? What in reality do we have to gain from it? When you look at Washington State, you look at Colorado State. Right now, Washington State has more marijuana retail stores than they have McDonald's or Starbucks. Colorado has more marijuana stores than they have McDonald's or Starbucks combined, and they beat them by over 400 stores. Colorado and Washington State, they are bragging a lot about the gross numbers of financial numbers that they are taking in. Those are the gross amounts. They don't talk about the net amounts when they take out all of the account of social services, the increased social services, the increased public safety services, and all the regulatory commissions that are combined. And when you look at what the actual towns, cities and towns are getting in those states, the amount is very little. And those states have triple the tax rate that the state of Massachusetts has. I believe our local rate would be 3% that we get from that. In numbers that I've obtained from the town, I think last year the town of Harwich obtained $380,000 approximately from the state, and that was in all taxes, whether it be meal tax, alcohol tax, and that's from retail sales, liquor stores, bars, restaurants. That was, everything combined was $380,000. How much are we really going to get at the local level from marijuana sales and retail sales? So my point is, what do we have to gain from it to do it? When you look at towns in Colorado, Washington State, and other states where they've had retail stores, you look at the increase of the property crimes in the areas where retail establishments are, the increase in traffic accidents with people under the influence in those towns where they're allowed, and the also increase in homelessness. Not that, and I'm not saying that the retail sales cause homelessness, but the homeless congregate to those communities where they are able to get easier access to it. So there are a lot of ancillary problems that are caused by allowing retail sales. And again, what is the overall benefit to the town of Harwich in that? It is not the financial boon that everybody thinks it is going to be. It does not decrease the black market, which is what a lot of people, big argument, decreases the black market, and it's going to cut down on the violence, and it's going to cut down on the other crime. It's not true. It does not play out in the fact, because in the state of Massachusetts, when they passed this legalized marijuana, it allowed for the home cultivation of up to 12 plants per household at the home. And that can be in addition to the 10 ounces of marijuana that you're allowed to have in your home. So you can have that 10 ounces of marijuana and you can still grow 12 plants. Each plant can yield, if somebody knows what they're doing, upwards of a pound of marijuana per plant. And that's where the black market is coming from, because people are growing it at their house. They're growing it very inexpensively, and they have an excess of marijuana, which they turn around and then sell to people on the black market. That is not going to change. The town of Harwich cannot pass a bylaw to prevent people from home grow of marijuana. So we're stuck with that regardless. So the black market is still going to be there. black market marijuana is still going to be far cheaper than what you're going to be able to pay at a retail store. Because the retail store is going to have overhead, they're going to have insurance, they're going to have taxes to pay, they're going to have help to pay. So the cost is going to be far significant, far more than what they would be able to buy on the street. Those street sales are going to continue. So we're still going to have the public safety burden of the black market to deal with, in addition to whatever the ancillary problems are caused by retail sales. Important, just so the public knows, this does not have anything to do with medical marijuana. The town of Harwich still has to allow, we cannot ban a medical marijuana dispensary from coming into town by state law. So medical marijuana is not affected by this, so people that have medical marijuana, a medical marijuana dispensary wants to open up, it's still going to be able to open up. So it does not really impact medical marijuana at all. But I do think that's important for people to know. The other thing from a procedural standpoint too, I do think it's very important that whatever decision the board makes, that there is a backup plan when you look at the time frame of everything. And I think I think one of the backup plans of extending the moratorium is probably a good idea. Just so I would hate to put all the eggs in a basket of trying to ban and then it doesn't ban, and we end up too late to pass a zoning bylaw for time, place, and manner. So I do think it's important on the planning board or the Board of Selectmen to make sure that that timing is planned out, whichever direction that we go, so we just don't pigeonhole ourselves into a position that we can't get back from. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else in the audience want to speak? Board discussion. Larry?
Very good discussions and good presentation. A couple points I'd like to highlight that I think that I can relate to. Chief, I'm older than you are, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective. But I think one of the issues that comes to me and comes to a lot of them, at least my age group, growing up in the 60s and 70s, is we don't take this seriously now because marijuana was 1% there, and it was a very soft effect. Now you're talking 15%. Which becomes a big issue, and I don't think people are aware of that, and we need to be sure of that. Problem I have as well is the testing. You know, we test for alcohol in blood. There's no test for marijuana right now to do an enforcement, and my understanding of the physiology of that is that don't hold your breath, because it's not the metabolism is not a straightforward way you can measure in blood and get a reading of it. It reacts differently with everyone. And it's very difficult to measure. I'm concerned about the public safety, drivers and all this stuff is a point you made. Unfortunately, we all seem to know people someone has had an opioid problem. And I've been lectured to more times than I care to admit to that there is a relationship between marijuana and opioid addiction. I don't quite understand that because you get the other side of that story, but there's something that we probably don't understand, whether it's just behavioral patterns make that happen, I don't know. The last point that you've mentioned that I just reemphasize is a 3% tax. The discussions we've had tonight in other forums is it's unlikely that would be a net gain for the town if you take in public safety costs. And so I think the whole revenue discussion, no matter how you phrase it, is not a meaningful discussion at this point. Not for us. Maybe for the state when they get a 10% increase, but not for locally, not for us. So, and I would agree if the ban makes sense. The last point that Bud made on the moratorium also makes sense. Mr. Chairman, I don't know when you'll deal with that, but.
Thank you, Larry. Julie?
Thank you for all the information. It's all very helpful, and I see it as really, it comes down to simple math. Is the more drugs that are out there, the more probability that kids will get them, be exposed, the more problems we'll have as a town, as a community, and then you take the math back to your point about what we get out of it, not a lot. So, I think overall, exposing ourselves to having the edibles and anything else that goes along with it is a huge concern for our town. I also think that as other towns rule it out, if we rule it in, we are in for a problem. So I think it's math and it's simple.
Thank you, Julie. Janelle?
Yeah, I agree. Option 1 is going to be what I vote for.
Don?
Well, it'd probably be easier and safer not to say anything, but I've been involved with kids' issues for most of my adult life. I worked for the U.S. Marshal Service as an asset manager for 5 years. While I hear what the chiefs have to say, there's a part of me that feels like post-prohibition. Now, I understand that, especially in the fires and growing, that's not analogous to where we are now, but it was when people had stills and were making their own stuff. Putting this in a regulated environment, to me, would be an important aspect of this. However, we've been hornswoggled by the state. The alcohol industry does not allow alcohol-laced candy, things that are clearly aimed at kids. I mean, I've read this several times, but that ballot initiative, the meandering ballot initiative, which makes one wonder what state they were in when they wrote it, really doesn't provide any kind of clear direction on this. One thing I will say is, I keep hearing this, but repeating the same thing over and over doesn't make it the truth. In my perfect world, we'd be talking about more highly regulating how many scripts go out for fentanyl and oxycodone. Kids who wind up graduating to heroin do it because it's cheaper than those legal things that are out there. I mean, I came back with a bottle of 30 oxycodones after I had my hip done. I used 2. I mean, in a sneakier environment, where would the other 28 go? And that's pretty much why a lot of these kids go to heroin, because the cost of crushing a pill becomes prohibitive, and they head that way. That's not to say that I condone marijuana, especially in youth. I view this in the same hawkish way I view alcohol. If you can't demonstrate to me that you can uphold whatever requirements that it is for you to do legal retail sales, then you should be thrown into jail for selling it to underage. It should be a more highly regulated environment. It is not being proposed that way by the state. As a matter of fact, it seems like a free-for-all. So my practical observation here is, regardless of what we do, this thing is rigged because of the way the Attorney General has put it out. We could have both of these bylaws ready, one to ban, one to sell under certain conditions in certain sites, so that we could regulate it into a point in place. My problem is, I could see a scenario where the same town meeting could not achieve a 2/3 consensus on either one of them. And my question to you is, okay, where are we going to go there? The state has no provisions for us if we can't adopt either. And that makes it rigged to me about either action, because I don't see a town meeting getting to 2/3 on either side of this issue. So I'm really concerned about what that means in the state. I don't want to see option 3. Option 3 is the Wild West. It's just a free-for-all. So, I mean, I'd go along with whatever the board decides, but my question is, how are we going to be able to deliver this at a town meeting? If you look at the ballot initiative, it was a 5% shift, because it was like 8,000 some odd people who voted, and it was defeated by 400 some odd people. Whatever we do should wind up resulting in something that's orderly, and I don't see that happening.
Thank you, Don. Chris?
I just wanted to, just on that, I was curious about when we did the moratorium, what was the vote on it? And we did not get a standing count, but the moderator called that as having well above the 2/3 requirement. So we do have that town meeting, at least at that time, did vote specifically to do in excess of the 2/3.
That's only available, however, until December of next year. The state has fixed that, too.
Well, you know, my sense on this is not a new conversation. I appreciate Detective Brackett's comments and both chiefs. The book's been written on this in other states. You don't find any positive information as far as statistics go and arrests go, Center for Disease Control, the uppage of that, car accidents, fires. Colorado's kind of written the book on it, and I've done an extensive amount of research on this, and I cannot support it in our community. So I think, with no other comments, I'd like this board to take a position, and I'd like to get a motion on whether this board will support it or not support it. So a positive motion to not support, or a positive motion to support, and then let us vote and send our message to start.
Can I ask a question first, Mr. Chair? Through you to the chiefs, because the biggest troubling part of this is, regardless of what we do, we live within a context. When there were towns, and there still are, throughout the South, that were dry towns for alcohol, the borders prohibited anything from coming in to a dry town, alcohol-wise. It seems to me, the way this construct is working, regardless of what we decide, is there anything that you can do to enforce not allowing legal marijuana in past our borders? Is there anything analogous to being a dry town in that area?
No, nothing whatsoever.
Frustrating.
So just to be clear, I only want to vote whether this board supports or does not support
Retail
first,
sales.
and then we'll get in, retail sales of marijuana. And then
Okay.
we'll get into the options, the zoning options afterwards. Chris?
I do think that where we laid out the options, the first option is to prohibit sales. So if option one was to have a favorable motion, then that would drive then the planning board to start to put together that, the answer would be to prohibit, period. And I think that is an easier course.
Yeah. And that was going to be my, Don, I appreciate your comments. I would like to move ahead because it is messed up, and I think we need to at least say directionally where we'd like to see it go. And hope that the state, and hopefully that someone listens to us, in the state, agrees. Okay.
Prior to the motion, Ed?
Well, just one comment. Even in the South, in dry counties, people were allowed to have alcohol in their homes. The dry county rules only affected commerce. No liquor stores, no sale of alcoholic beverages at restaurants or taverns or anything like that. In Massachusetts, there are still a few dry communities, Martha's Vineyard in the western part of the state, but certainly some of the houses on Aquina, which is still a dry town, folks have a bottle of brandy in the in the liquor cabinet, and then as to what Don said, the issue, that we still have yet to see, because they have just appointed the quote regulators, is what the regulations the state is going to impose on this, given that you have basically 4 out of 5 people who were opposed to and actively opposed to the passage of this action. It'll be interesting to see what level of regulation they come up with.
Thank you, Ed. Larry, do you want to make a motion?
But we're not moving to the option, right? I move
We can do the,
we can do
A, yeah.
I move we accept the option one, which prohibit the sales of marijuana in Harwich.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to prohibit the sale of marijuana in Harwich, option 1. Any discussion?
Yes.
Don?
I'm actually going to vote for the motion, despite what I said, but mainly it's because of what a horrible mess this has become on the state level. There's no clarity about us being able to exert any kind of home rule in this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, Chris, going on, that gives us a general bylaw.
It was
and a
unanimous,
zon-
right, Mr. Chairman?
Unanimous,
Yep.
yes. That gives us a general bylaw, and that gives us a zoning bylaw. So now, as a backup to that, because I don't think that we need a moratorium, an extension on the moratorium, so long as we get a backup bylaw for a time, place, and manner, in case the zoning bylaw fails at town meeting, shouldn't we consider, and John Giorgio said yes, shouldn't we consider a backup bylaw for time, place, and manner in case the voters of town of Harwich deny that bylaw.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that, and originally my concept was to not support the zoning amendment beyond the June 30th. But if the board wants to do, which obviously you just voted, option 1, then probably a logical follow-up to that would be to also do an extension of the moratorium to December. I know we've had a track record of not having a fall town meeting, and I know that would go against that track record. But, you know, if the fallback position, if town meeting was presented with 2 options, I think potentially it would be a little confusing for town meeting. If they're presented with the option of, we believe that it should be banned, and that's the zoning bylaw that it would be banned, and the general bylaw that it would be banned. If they don't vote that, then maybe the next logical step for them would be to vote to extend the moratorium. So now if they've basically said, we want it, and we didn't, well, again, if it gets a 60% vote, what does that really tell you? But the moratorium extension would probably then give the planning board time to regroup and put together another option to try to present something to town meeting.
Mary?
Mary Maslowski, I just want to clarify for the moratorium so that you're clear. After town meeting, there's a whole administrative process that the town clerk has to go through. A moratorium, a zoning bylaw, they all have to go to the Attorney General's office. So typically, town clerks have 30 days. So even at the earliest, if you had a May 1st town meeting, you got it there on May 2nd, they have 90 days once it's there to pass it. So the point of the moratorium is to get you past your June 30th so that you have enough time to go through the administrative process. Because that moratorium, that zoning bylaw, all has to get through the Attorney General's process first, and then it has to get published. So most bylaws can't take effect for, I think it's at least 90 days. So the moratorium is really to get you past that administrative process so that you don't have a lapse. So I don't know if that was really clear as to why you needed the moratorium, but I think the moratorium is necessary either way, because otherwise you could run into a problem where the Attorney General has that time frame to go through. So if it takes them at their maximum, even their 90 days, you're up against your end of July, and all it takes is one application to come in, and they're in before the effectiveness of the new zoning bylaw, whatever you choose, whether it's a moratorium, whether it's a full-out ban or a zoned section. So that's really your need for your moratorium. It just buys you time to get through your full administrative process at the state. So
Thank you, Mary.
you're welcome.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's kind of a point that I was trying to make, is I don't want to see us in option 3 where it's the Wild West. As I understood what Mr. Giorgio was saying, is we turned this down at town meeting, we got nothing, which means it's presupposed that it's as right anywhere. I'd sooner see us have suspenders and the belt. If we want to go as a board to town meeting and ask to be turned down, we should understand that we have the prospect of that not occurring, and we need to have this moratorium, because the order of this is much more important than letting it just free fall. I can't imagine us in a scenario where we put all our eggs in that one basket and it doesn't happen, and now we're scurrying to get a town meeting together, but in the interim, people are setting up businesses.
Chris?
Yeah, so I think the recommendation is the same, that option 1 probably should have the moratorium as the second vote. And then if for some reason town meeting votes both of them down, well, to be honest, I hate to say it, but we've already been down there where the medical marijuana, we tried to do zoning to regulate that, and that was voted down. So we have crossed that the river at least once before. I think this time, though, we do have a town meeting last year that, when faced with the question, the moderator didn't think that was even close. So he called it as having the sufficient 2/3. So I think that as a measure, and I think some of the points obviously that have been made, that by having the plan of going in with the 2, the zoning bylaw and the fallback of doing the moratorium, probably makes the most sense.
John?
And that's kind of what I'm suggesting, as putting my government geek hat on. If this thing were put towards the last couple of articles, the moratorium, and the zoning bylaw was earlier, we'll know what's going on, and we can actually, if the zoning bylaw passes, we call for an indefinite postponement of that article. But if it doesn't pass, we need to have something there, or else we're going to walk out and there's nothing.
Well, I think, Don, to that point, we could do an indefinite postponement on another bylaw. And my concern is moratorium or no moratorium. My concern is if the zoning does not pass and this expires, the state can put them in Harwich anywhere they want.
That's why I'd like the moratorium,
Right.
just in case.
So if we don't do our work with planning, and we don't give planning enough time
Right.
to put together a zoning bylaw for a time, place, and manner, I mean, we as a board just said we don't want it. But if we haven't done the work, and this expires in any way, or town meeting doesn't, then they go wherever the state decides.
No moratorium.
So moratorium?
All right,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, I would, in that regard, I move that we extend the moratorium to December 31st, 2018.
I second that.
Moved and seconded to extend the moratorium.
And
Any discussion?
just one point. This is such a critical issue. If something were to happen, we could, I think, have a spatial fall meeting to go after the zoning bylaw, rather if we had a moratorium till December, till the end of next year. And I think that would possibly avoid confusion, and Michael, get to your point about having a backup, even if it does give us a cost for a fall meeting.
Do you know?
I agree with you, but I still don't know if there's enough time, given the 30 days that the clerk has, plus the 90 days that the Attorney General has.
This
That's
real
120 days. We still wouldn't have enough time even with a fall meeting.
Right.
close. We'd have to move it up.
I thought to that point, in the Giorgio write-up, he uses the word zoning bylaw and general bylaw, and I thought the point of the general bylaw was to help us bridge to, because zoning things, and I'm out of my league here in terms of some of these zoning elements, but maybe one of the other folks in the room. In his write-up, he recommends, if we're gonna do the moratorium, I thought he recommends doing the general bylaw as well as the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, he does.
So that covers that 60-day period of time that the Attorney General is reviewing it.
No, he said, Attorney Giorgio said we should have the extended moratorium.
Yes.
That's
In
what he
place.
said.
Mhm.
He said we
Place,
should
okay,
have that in
that acts
place.
as that bridge in
That's right,
case
to
something.
protect us.
Yes.
Right. So he suggested we do the moratorium while we do these.
Yes.
But I think the motion's appropriate to do option one, as you've already voted, and to do the moratorium to extend out to December 31st.
Which is what he suggested.
Right.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, Chris?
Thank you.
Questions from Ally in the back on what, or should we just give that to her tomorrow? Do you have any questions?
I just want to make sure the Ally Sabatino, Town Planner, I just want to make sure I understand the board's vote. So the first one would be for this town meeting to have, to prohibit the sale of marijuana, the general bylaw, and also the moratorium to go to December 31st, 2018. If the voters vote that down, then we come to a special fall town meeting to vote a zoning bylaw time, place, manner. Is that correct?
And we're going to, there's two bylaws in this proposal. This first proposal, a
Yes.
zoning bylaw
And
to
the-
prohibit
yes,
and a
yes.
general. So the
Yeah.
first one is a two bylaw.
Okay.
And yes, you are right.
And Coleman and Page provided that language to
Yes,
accomplish
I have
that.
that. Yes,
so.
thank you. Okay, thank you.
Great. Anything further on that? Okay, next up is the Harwich Energy Committee charge and renaming of the committee. And thank you, Detective Brackett and both chiefs for your comments tonight. Dr. Cole is here tonight. We have there was a request about a month ago to update the Harwich Energy Committee's charge and approve the renaming of the committee. Julie, do you have anything on this?
I haven't done anything on a draft of a charge. I've only done the Housing Committee draft, so.
So the charge, the proposed charge is in our packet. Don, do you have any questions on the proposed charge and name? Janelle?
I don't, nope.
I don't,
Harry?
no, it's good.
Dr. Cole, do you want to add anything?
Well, I just would remind you that when we first appeared and talked about this, you checked with the town administrator that there was no change in charter language required to make either of these changes.
Okay, thank you. So, can I get a motion to approve the Harwich Energy Committee charge and renaming?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the Utility and Energy Conservation Committee charge as is.
And the renaming?
And the renaming, excuse me, and the renaming of.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. Next up is Municipal Revenue and Economic Development Committee charge. There was 2 examples put in our packet tonight. Can I guess I'm going to start with Janelle on this.
So, this is the one that Larry rewrote?
I didn't see the one that
Yeah, right? I forwarded that one to you.
I don't see it in here.
I don't
There-
either.
There's with chamber, without chamber, and that we'd decided that I'd lost that debate.
Yeah, we weren't, we weren't gonna put chamber in there at all.
And I added a sentence about efficiency and regulatory.
Maybe I can find that in the email and read it, and then we can make a motion with
Okay.
that sentence real quick, since it didn't get in there.
But can you? Can you do that?
I think we can, because it's
Yeah,
just
it
adding a
depend-
sentence.
I think it depends if it's kind of within the spirit of it. I'm a little concerned, did you send that to staff so staff could incorporate that?
I sent
or-
it to be correct on open meeting law, I sent it to.
You sent it to me, and I
Janelle.
I
And you
replied to
forwarded it, you
you and
replied to
Michael.
me, that was for the packet, but it's not in the, my suggestion was not, I only added a sentence, basically, but it's not, it's neither one of
Let's
these.
see where it is. It's the second one, version 2, and it's in the purpose part. Let's see. I can't read my phone, it's so small. Okay. So let me just read the purpose as Larry has written it, that I will propose that we adopt. The Municipal Revenue and Economic Development Committee will generate ideas to offset municipal financial obligations by helping the town generate additional revenue. The committee will also explore potential operational efficiencies to reduce costs and regulatory procedures to further encourage a positive environment for economic development. The committee will work with the Harwich Chamber of Commerce to generate ideas for increasing the town's year-round business economy and capitalizing on the seasonal revenue stream. The committee will present ideas to the Board of Selectmen in a regular open meeting, at least quarterly. In addition, the committee will provide a non-voting liaison to the Harwich Housing Committee, Real Estate and Open Spaces Committee, Harwich Finance Committee, and Harwich Planning Board. In the committee makeup, the Municipal Revenue and Economic Development Committee shall be appointed by the Board of Selectmen and will be comprised of 7 voting members plus a non-voting representative from the Harwich Chamber of Commerce. And then everything else is the same.
Okay.
Is that clear for you guys?
Yeah.
So,
Chris, we're fine on a motion. There's going to be very little changes to that.
Yeah, I think it's within the scope, so it's probably fine. We just need the language, so when we print it.
I'll
on the-
forward this right to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To that point, Mr. Chair, I believe that if someone had made that amendment tonight, it would still be within the confines of the discussion that people could reasonably expect under the open meeting law.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the charge of the Municipal Revenue and Economic Development Committee as presented by,
As amended.
as amended. As amended, as I read it.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the charge as amended. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Unanimous, Chris? Next up is request to authorize the chair to sign the representation letter regarding the audit of financial statements of the town. That is in the packet. It's standard. I did meet with the finance director on that and Chris on that. It's something that's standard that we do with the auditors. Can I get a motion on that?
Move that we accept the agreement and have the chair sign.
Second. We'll go. You
Okay,
second
moved and
it.
seconded to approve. Any
Very-
discussion?
Very exciting reading.
Yeah, very exciting. I'm signing on a lot of lines, I'll just tell you that. 44 points. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up was recommendation on award of bid for 4 Central Ave property. I did announce that we discussed this in executive session tonight, and that we will pursue, Chris, Town Administrator, will pursue negotiations on said property. Next up is septic loan program. I'm going to let Chris give an overview on this. It's in the packet again tonight. I was asked one question by somebody that was under the impression that it was only a 5% loan. It is in fact a 5% interest, but we want to continue to put this in the paper and on the website. It's on the website now, but we want to continue to educate people in East Harwich, because those are the ones that are going to be affected, that there is a septic loan program available through the county. With that, Chris, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this kind of brief, but just to hit some of the program highlights. I think it's important that people understand that this program has been around for an extended period of time. It does deal with septic systems that have failed, as well as people that want to do an alternative septic system. So not only is it related to the sewer hookups, but it's also related primarily to those two areas. So I think that that's important. I think reading through the material, it is something that reimbursement costs are related to specifically to the project. Again, the project that we have puts the sewer in the street. The homeowner is obligated to get it from the street into their home. So that is the cost related. The estimated costs are, I believe it was $5,000 to $7,000 is the experience that Chatham had in that area. As the chairman indicated, a 5% interest and a maximum of 20-year repayment schedule. You can prepay early. That was one of the things. The payments are made on a monthly basis and payable to Barnstable County. The loan would be made only for residential property, so this is not for business. It does include housing that is not just owner-occupied, but a rental homeowner that has a summer property, if you would, is also eligible for this. Residential properties include condominiums and apartments. The homeowner obtains bids to do the work and then contracts to have that work done. And at the end, it is a betterment assessment onto the property itself. So folks, because it is linked to the property, should be able to secure the loan documents, because it's an assessment. It's not necessarily a typical loan. So I think those are some of the elements, and as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, we do have it on the website, and certainly folks, if they have an interest, can obviously contact the references that we have on there that are related. I think I do have their names right here. So the county can be reached. It's through the Community Septic Management Loan Program, and Kendall Ayers is one person that can be reached, Angelo DiCarlo and Cynthia Madden. The numbers 508-375-6610, 6877, and 6855 for references. And that is in the package materials too, if people want to read through that.
Great. So when the county was here and did the presentation, I believe they said, and actually at the councilors meeting the other day, they announced they had roughly $40 million in that program, and that there was about a 99% approval on those loans. So, as part of our education, I know we had some meetings with some of the groups in East Harwich, and there was some concern, last-minute concern about how they were going to pay for this. Maybe we could try and get a meeting together with that same group and just individually go over this with that group and let them know that this loan exists. And I guess we would entertain other ideas for loans, but this one seemed to be a great program. Ed?
The septic loan program also is, as money gets paid back, it then gets loaned out again, and they are well into loaning out money that has been paid back on the loans that were taken out more than 20 years ago. So it's been a well proven and effective program.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sharon.
Just a question for you. That application for that is on where on the website?
It's on the, if you go into the meeting package, we actually have it in the meeting package, and they do have it online at the county. It's a 2-page application.
So we don't have it on our website?
We do as our meeting packet.
We do as our meeting package.
But is
We
it
can
listed?
make it more prominent if that makes some
Yeah,
sense.
I was just going to say, because I think I found it through the meeting package. What I'm saying is that the people here in Harwich, this ought to be available on our website for the people to access it easily.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we got the thumbs up from Jamie,
Good.
so, thank you,
Can I ask a
Jamie.
question on that?
Julie?
So, in terms of applying for this loan, though, they can't apply till they have the plan in place, right? Or can they apply ahead of time?
Well, I think that from looking at this, a couple things, we're not going to have sewers on the street for probably
Right.
2 years. And then
That's
they
what I
do
mean, that
have
we don't want
a
people-
year to connect up. So yeah, to your point, you probably do want to time it out to a little bit more. If they monitored town meeting, which this town meeting in May will be the request for the capital funds to do the project itself, put the pipes in the ground, that would be an indicator. The other indicator too is as they're going in and they're doing the survey work now,
Right.
part of that survey work will be where do you want to have your tie-in? So you will have to have some sense for where you would like to locate that. The other thing I probably should just point out as I'm sitting here saying it, the folks in Chatham, at least in Chatham's example, most of folks over there were able to get a home loan through or refinance their mortgage. So this is only one option that can be done as a betterment for folks that may not be able to get that financing. I think their experience was that the vast majority of folks were able to get refinancing through their traditional mortgage lenders. The reason why I say that is 5% may be high for people, but that there are lower rates if you're able to get it through your own home
Yeah,
mortgage
and
mechanism.
I think that you probably, when you're filling out this application, would have to have a plan that shows how your connection's gonna work before they're gonna look at your application, is my only point. So we just wanna make sure that people understand that although these funds are available, they wanna time it to when they've got a plan to accompany their application, which is a ways off.
Yes.
Thank you, Julie.
Along with that, one of the things that I think that maybe the town ought to consider, actually, there's two, and I think some of it was either in the certificate or the decision, where the town was going to provide a list of, I might be using the wrong term, qualified
Installers.
people that are able to do this.
Licensed,
Yes, it
right.
was in the sewer regulations, because we mirrored our sewer regulations on the town of Chatham, and they have that as a requirement.
All right, so what I'm saying is, do we have a list of the people that qualify for this, and that would be something else? In other words,
Yeah, no,
I mean, qualified to do the sewering. In other words, so that the people, when they go out to get bids,
Yeah.
all right, that they have a list of people that are,
Yeah, I think the term of art is a licensed drain layers. I think
Yes,
it's a drain
yes,
layer that
yes,
actually
yes,
installs this. So, yeah, I think when we come up to the Maytown meeting, we probably should have that list.
have
be
that list
more-
available, and that, again,
defined.
should be something, it would be a good idea on the website, once we
Yeah,
have it, once we have
the
it.
list. Sure.
Along at the same location probably is where the application would be. The other thing I'd like to bring up, and this is, again, probably a little premature, I did read through that application, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have difficulty navigating through this, that moving forward, closer to when this is going to be done, whether there's going to be like maybe somebody in the town, somebody in the Chamber of Commerce, maybe even somebody in the community center that's going to be able to help these people work their way through this, because I'm sure there's going to be some of them that are not going to be able to do it. So again, that's something to think about moving forward with that soaring process.
Thank you.
Just a thought.
Thank you. Anything else on that? Okay, next up, I put on general discussion of middle school cultural center operations. I have a few things on this, but I think I'd like to start, if Carolyn could kind of give us a quick overview. I think there was more people added to the waiting list, and just how things are going over there.
Thank you. There are more people. We're currently at 21 people on our wait list. I have met with Sean Libby, Facilities Director, and we are getting the 3 classrooms back in line, so portable classrooms, I apologize, back in line so that we can rent those. We are having we do have a draft of the wait list application that we'll present to you so that we can have people sign up. We do keep a list that's public, anyone can see it, but would like to have a more formalized forms just to keep everyone knowing where they are and what's happening. We are, I believe next week, I'm also meeting with the Junior Theater Board at the Cultural Center to show them some great space, as you all know. We have worked with quite a few different people to try. There's some dance studios that we're reaching out to try and get people in the auditorium and the cafeteria area. We're going to come up with a better name than that, but all the rooms are full and will remain full. We will have some turnover. We had a renter who's only 3 months. His rental agreement is almost up, and the next people have viewed the room and are ready to go in, so there should be no interruption in the flow of revenue. As projected, it will be at least $9,500 a month when we get the additional rooms online, plus the other areas that we rent. That will increase as well, and I'll be back with you to you with a spreadsheet. Erica Strezpeck has been the program aide and is working on she is in the building. We're also working with capabilities, so we have some open time, which has been very helpful, so people who are interested in getting on the wait list can actually come in and see when somebody's in there. So I don't know if you're looking for anything else, but I'm happy to.
I want to open it up to questions from the board on what you've just said and on the general on that
Sure.
piece, and then we'll get on to the next. Jenna, any questions?
So capabilities is manning the building so that it can be open to the public. Is that what you meant?
I mean, Capabilities works, they send a gentleman over, Patrick, who is actually a Harwich resident, went to school there. He's now in college, and he's in the building, stationed at the front door, while Erica is also in the building, so there's more than one person there. But
see.
yes,
But he essentially acts as a greeter for
Correct.
for folks that want to come in and look at the building.
Great.
And are there set times that the building is open to the public so other people can see?
absolutely, and we will get you those times. As I said, he just went back to school, so we're waiting for a school schedule, so.
Okay.
But we will post those.
2 more things. Is the meeting with the Harwich or the Cape Cod Theater Company open to the public?
It's
Or
their,
open to the board?
it is with their board, so I don't know what their rules are, but they had wanted to see it. I'll be happy to find out for you. But it is their board that's coming.
Okay. And internet. Is there any talk as of right now to work with One Cape, or not One Cape, Open Cape, or anybody else to get some internet services over there?
There's talk every day, but you might want to look a little further down the table for an actual answer to
We
that.
actually are looking at that element and seeing what we can do and what the arrangement would be. So we are getting some ideas of what the options are available to us. I had Sean Libby in the office today, but I forgot to ask him the status. They are working on it to see how we would be able to accomplish that. And I have had some discussions with Foster as well from IT to kind of coordinate. So we are looking, once we have an action plan that we're able to accomplish, we'll present that to the board.
Don?
Thank you.
Julie?
I just have a question. So we have a couple of leases coming up that are going to expire, and then we have somebody going in to take their place. And forgive me, because this has been such a process. Do you bring those people, those leases back to us? Do we, no, she does
These are
those.
just rental agreements.
Right,
They're not.
okay, right, they're not leases, sorry.
And the board did defer to myself as the
Yeah, okay,
agent, and then for Carolyn to do the
Right.
legwork.
thank you.
Rental agreement officer.
Part of those other duties is maybe assigned.
Thank you,
I
I couldn't
apologize if
remember
I
that
called
part.
it a
Yeah,
lease.
no,
It is
thank
a
you.
room rental. I apologize.
Larry?
Thank you, Michael. Carolyn, nice job. For open disclosure, a year ago, I was proponent of moving this, keeping that open for affordable housing. And it's moved beyond that, and this is, he's making good progress. I've also always said I want this to be transparent and have fully loaded revenue and costs, indirect costs. With your work and the way it's going, I think we're in the driver's seat. You have 21 people, waiting list.
Correct.
I just want to be sure we're not, and you're bringing this information to us, so I think you're doing this anyway. My fear is and was that we would wait till after the 2 or 3 year period to have a look at this. And I'd like to have almost, monthly's too much, but a quarterly review of revenues, expenses, because I think we need a discussion of how do we, in my mind, starting this is transitional to make it be as profitable and as beneficial to the town as we can. So I want to be sure that, in my word, I said transparent, but I want to be sure we got all that information in so we're making those charges. Because in the end, I know we're a town, we're not business, but in the end, you're going to make some decisions. If you have a waiting list, who gets in and who doesn't. Well, if we pretend we're in charge, we can pick the people who get into who best benefits us, right? And so I think we need that information, and I appreciate you putting that together for us, and Chris doing the rest of it.
You want to?
No, you go ahead if you want.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the costs, but thank you. And no, I'm going to keep you up here. Thank you for your tireless effort in making this work, too. I know how much time you spend on this, and I know some of it's outside of your job. So I can't thank you enough, and the compliments are out there in the public. People love it.
It is truly my pleasure. It has been a great learning experience, and I do thank the board who has been supportive in this endeavor. It really has, I hope, been something that the town can be proud of. And I will say that even people who came down on the other side and were very interested in housing have been complimentary. And I think that bodes well for all of you who have been invested in it. So I return the compliment.
So the gymnasium, it's been kind of rumor, I guess, that the gymnasium is not being used as much by rec. Is that true? Is there openings in the gymnasium?
It is being used quite a bit by the recreation. There might have been a week where they have not been as busy, but it is certainly, and I will get you their schedule. And if there's any time that they're not, Detective Sergeant, is it Brackett?
Yes.
Fills time also. So there's quite a few different people who are also in there, and I'll get you that schedule so that it's certainly, we try and post it so that's visible for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I did attend a meeting of the Recreation Commission, and they did vote that right now, the way that building has been used in terms of recreation programs, there was no assessment, no fees that we were collecting that was put into the fund that has been created. We now have, we did have a meeting. Carol has provided Eric with the fund number. We will start to segment that off. The trouble is, because I think we went a little bit past July 1st, anybody that's signed up and has a year program, we kind of missed. You can't go back and retroactively charge people. So what we're doing is any new programs going in there, that $5 per head fee will be assessed as part of that. That will go into the fund, and we'll be able to track that. I think that has a separate line item that the accountant assigned, so we'll be able to see how much revenue that we get from rec fees. And that has not been part of our calculations to date, so that will be new revenue. But it will occur over depending on the season, fall season, whatever, that he'll start to roll those programs over.
Chris, with that, I'd like to ask that the rec number, obviously if recreation, we're talking about a per head fee here, but obviously per head fee is one number, and then the other number is what money rec is generating by operating in that gymnasium. Because it's not as though they could go to Orleans and rent their gym. The programs wouldn't happen if we didn't have the middle school gym.
Correct.
So I'm not asking that we take their money, but I'd ask for a line item that says this much money was generated by rec in that space. Because I don't really see another option, and for the critics out there that think that this building should be sold or should be given away or should be taxed an exorbitant amount of indirect costs, they need to see what it's actually doing for the town. So moving on to the next item I had was the name. So Cultural Center, which drew a little bit of criticism, and it was constructive criticism, but the Yarmouth Cultural Center requested or asked that we consider changing the name from Cultural Center to something else. And I read the email chain, spoke to their executive director, spoke to Bob Nash, who put that project together. And again, it was a very respectful request, but they want to eliminate any confusion on our cultural center versus their cultural center. So I wanted to bring up the idea to the board. Chris, I saw your response. This is a 2-year project. Originally, we discussed 5 years, and at the rate it's going, I'm going to be back before the board and ask the board to extend it to 5 years sooner rather than later. So I'd like to at least start the conversation about changing the name to a more permanent name. Janelle? She's smiling.
Harwich Cultural and Civic Center is what I propose.
Okay.
Are we
I'm going to start with Carolyn.
I honestly don't, I will tell you that I certainly read the email chain, and I looked at it much like Chris had mentioned, that we were more identifying because it was hard for me to market. Would you like to be in the middle school? People thought, graduated already, thanks so much. So I don't have I certainly don't have a horse in the race, whatever you want to.
I agree with Chris's response. However, looking now forward, these are people that we want to align ourselves with, and these are people that are sending us people, and I want to make sure that we keep a good relationship with them. Any other thoughts on this, Julie?
I see both sides. I see, trying to identify ourselves as something that stands out, so that we don't get mixed in with others as they think we're going to take over with that cultural name. But I also feel like it is a cultural center, so I don't really know how else we better define it. I mean, I don't have a great idea for a name. I kind of lean towards the cultural center because it says something about the town, I feel like. I don't know.
Larry?
I don't.
No. Don?
Probably going to get myself into trouble here again. I've been involved with a bunch of theaters through the years on the Cape, including what was the HJT and Chatham Drama Guild. And I saw all the email chain, but it was somewhat off-putting to a certain degree because I feel like, okay, we've got the word Cape and we've got the word theater in our name, so you can't use either Cape or theater in your name. It is cultural. I mean, I've been to the Yarmouth facility, and it's a splendid place. It does great work, but I don't think anybody who actually lives around here would confuse the two for being the same thing. I think we could kind of delineate it with cultural and civic, but I mean, I don't want to drop the word cultural entirely because we copyrighted the name cultural.
Right.
You did pretty good there, Don. You didn't get in trouble.
You sure?
Chris?
You're going to escort me to the car?
Yeah, I just, from my standpoint, we need to break out of, the habit of calling it the middle school. I think we've done that by creating the Harwich Cultural Center. In terms of their request, they were misinformed, thinking that we were a private nonprofit that was in direct competition with them. We're the town of Harwich. Last time I checked, we're the only ones that can use officially the word the town of Harwich. So, we have a Chatham Community Center, we have a Harwich Community Center. We're far enough away. My issue is it took me 3 months to get the friggin' sign made. And do I want 6 more months to get a new sign made? So, I shouldn't be so flip, but I think if we're trying to establish a brand, then let's, Harwich Cultural Center, you know, is just easy. If you guys want to authorize a 5-year and let's do a more permanent naming and civic, you know, is something that makes sense and we're going to do it for 5 years, and then it's worth the 3 to 6 months it's going to take me to get the sign changed. But, you know, we need to establish that identity, and I think that, you know, we've done a great job of moving beyond, well, at least some of us still call it the middle school on occasion. But, you know, we're trying to move on past that. But, you know, if the board wants it to have another name, I do wonder a little bit about civic. I mean, I've been to some civic centers, and, you know, to me, a civic center is much more holding town meeting at it. It's a much bigger venue than what basketball venues, you know, sports. And I think we do lose a little bit of the target. But, you know, if the board wants, the only thing I'd ask is I don't want to change this thing every 6 months. So let's pick a name and decide. And I would say, you know, under the charter, it says that I'm responsible whether I like it or not for all town buildings. So I ultimately did pick the name. And, you know, if there's a better name out there and you want to move it to, you know, I guess I'm open to it.
So can we leave this at does anyone on the board have a problem with Carolyn talking to some of the people that are in there and maybe coming up with some suggestions, not,
I would,
Yes, I do.
not permanent?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
The only reason I do is because artists are very creative, and some of the other creative names have come forth, but it's still a town building, and that's why I also want to keep the word civic in there, because rec is not cultural, and yet they're the ones utilizing the gym 90% of the time. Maybe, no, 100% of the time. And I don't think it's up to the artists to create the name for a town building.
Well, I would say it's up to the voters. So getting suggestions and us approving or not approving, I would say that it's certainly up to the people of the town of Harwich that actually own the building to make a suggestion, not us as a board.
But many of those people who have lease agreement, or rental agreements, don't live in Harwich.
Suggestions don't hurt from anybody. Larry?
Oh, my minor point would be to leave it as a Harwich Cultural Center and respond to Yarmouth that, ask them to monitor it. If they find there's confusion from their end, you know, this is an experiment for us, we can change later. We shouldn't, I don't know if we need to change right now, but that would give them a respectful way to respond to it.
Okay. Carolyn?
No, I'm just writing down what I gotta do.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll leave this as no action.
Julie has something to say. No?
All set? Okay, no action required. Ed, come on up.
Well, there are those of us who refer to it as the really old high school. But in any event, another, just, it'd be a small change, but you could call a way to distinguish it from any confusion with the facility in Yarmouth would be to call it the Harwich Cultural Arts Center. And cultural arts is more than just art. It's cooking cultural arts. And in many countries that have very distinct national sports, that's one of their cultural arts. So I think it's a much more encompassing term than one would think.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
You know, just to build on that, I'm just thinking about this, and that might be important to include, because an abbreviation would be HCC, which is Harwich Community Center,
Right.
right? Like, HCC is the Harwich
Harwich
Community
Community
Center.
Center.
If it's the Harwich Cultural Center, it's the same.
HCCC, Harwich
Yeah,
Cultural
right.
and Civic
So-
Center.
Well, yeah, or,
Okay,
but
so
to,
we'll leave this as
so,
no
yeah.
action taken? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, back onto the, there was an email that went around from a neighborhood association meeting that led to some concern, and it was forwarded to a lot of people, and a selectman was named that had a conversation about transparency and about the actual costs of running the middle school. And the number was used, 300,000 to 400,000. And the number was used as though the board, and I'm not quoting the selectmen because it was minutes sent by an association. I want to be clear that The critics of this project from the beginning have made up numbers, and it was referred to a number of $125,000 that the town is saying it costs to run. $125,000 number has been Chris's line item in a budget, roughly $64 million budget. And that $125,000 number has come under more scrutiny than any other number in the budget. And it's a little irritating, I guess, for lack of better words. Projections and guesses shouldn't be being said by selectmen. We should be deferring to town administration. We should be getting actual numbers. Selective allocation of indirect costs really, unless this board is willing to vote on a policy, really should stop. And we should not be having conversations in public and I would say embarrassing the department head that works tirelessly at building this community center for us, or arts center, and administration for whom we approve his budget. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to me, it's embarrassing to Reed, and I don't think we as selectmen should be doing it. And again, if we want to have the conversation about allocation of indirect costs, then we should have it across the board. But highway's not going to not mow the lawn there or take care of the building. It's a town asset. And we also, on top of the $125,000 line item approved by everybody in the budget this year, set up a revolving fund so that money going into this will go back. We did get the support from town meeting, and I stood up and said, give us a year to run this and we'll give you actual numbers. So we as a board approve this project as a board. Minority positions shouldn't matter, and we shouldn't be giving the public false numbers. So anyone want to add anything to that or have the conversation about indirect cost allocation? I think it's time we did it as a board and we did it across the board. We have, you know, Angelo last year was critical about indirect costs for certain departments, and I really don't want to go down that road. And I think we owe administration and the department heads a certain amount of respect, and we should give it to them. Anyone have any comments?
I agree with you about the indirect costs. It doesn't really make any sense. The DPW is a department, and their job is to take care of all town buildings. They have a budget. The other departments that operate out of buildings should not be assessed by the DPW for costs for mowing the lawn or maintaining the walls or painting or anything like that. So I agree with you 100% on that.
I would agree with that as well.
Anything else? Don?
Just to throw my 2 cents in, I mean, before Ed was at the MMA, I was. I also administered a $26 million federal program. I find it somewhat astounding that we pick and choose. I'm pretty sure we don't get a bill from the highway department to plow the parking lot when it snows here, or the library. We seem to be picking and choosing people we think are cash rich within the town and pretty vulnerable to start assessing overhead fees to them. But unless we do that uniformly, and at that point, man, are we going to have a complex budget. We're a municipality. We offer certain municipal services, and if we decide that we don't want to offer 1 or 2 of those services, then we can delete it entirely, but to actually start creating a profit center out of parts of the government because we think they can pay it, it does us all a disservice. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the operation of that building involves insurance, electricity, the unfortunate assessment of 50% for the active septic system. But other than that, it would be sitting there. And we've had the argument about going into affordable housing and what that might do to that septic system, which is shared by the elementary school. It's there. We've got certain things that we're going to have to pay to let people in, but then to start actually creating a profit center so that some other departments can profit off of that it's insane.
Larry?
Yeah, I'll speak for alone for knowing more about indirect costs, and not because I'm interested in profit centers, but because And not that I want to pick on any department, I think it should be across the board, and I think it should be, it's not exact science, but if you're, for decision-making, for management of the town, it seems to me we ought to know what the costs are in the case we do get to the point where we're trying to prioritize activities. You know, we have revenue and costs, and to not know, it can be a significant cost factor going in, I think is part of the, leaves us a gap in our operations and how we manage where we're going.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I'll take it up as a line item if you want to propose it. We will do it at that point across the board, because we're not gonna not clean our beaches because the rec doesn't use them. We're not gonna not mow Brooks Park, and there's a certain thing that community does in my mind, and community, we are a community, certain things that generate revenue, certain things that don't, and our DPW is gonna exist regardless, so. Certainly, I would take up a line item so we can have a longer conversation about indirects, but until we have that conversation, until we make a policy, I think as a board, we really should adopt the practice of not projecting without fact and embarrassing administration or department head. Middle school, the last thing I had on middle school, Carolyn, was as these leases come up, and I guess this goes to you as well, Chris, as these leases come up, I imagine they're staggered leases.
Rental agreement?
Rental agreements, sorry.
Lease needs
I would like to see a fee schedule. I would like to see something different about people that are renting, multiple people renting rooms. So if
Shared
we have
rooms.
a one person in a room and we charge $300 for it, if that person then has 3 people in a room, we really should consider a fee schedule to up the rent.
Sure. Put something,
Whether
yeah.
it's, $450 or $100 for each additional person. However you guys come up with it, I'd like to see a proposal on that, and really to continue to make sure that that building covers its costs and continues to grow.
Yeah, I think to that point, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that, obviously, I've taken a few economics courses, over my academic career, and when you have supply and demand, and we seem to have a fairly high demand for space, we probably should revisit the fee schedule anyway, and we can certainly look at that element as a feature. So I think there's things that we should look to try to make sure we generate.
I want to make it clear that we want to keep it affordable for artists, too.
Right.
We are talking artists, and we did fill that building for a reason in a very short amount of time, so I don't want it to be unreachable for people.
Yeah,
but
I'm not talking about doubling
if
it,
we're dividing
but-
space, we should certainly look
Yep.
at that. Janelle?
Also, maybe limits of time for the rental agreements. I mean, if we have a 21-person wait list right now, the people who are in there now, do we operate it like a boat slip, or do we give them a term limit? I think we should have that discussion. I don't know what the answer is, but it is something to consider, because being a cultural center and wanting to support all of the arts, is it fair that so-and-so who rented in 2017 is still in there in 2025? Just a discussion that I think we should have definitions for.
Something to think about. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on the middle school anyone wants to bring up? Okay. Moving on to new business, approve additional ballot question for Cape Cod Tech School. Chris, will you give us
Yes,
an
thank you,
overview?
Mr. Chairman. We did get some materials today. Actually, Anita's been patiently waiting in the audience. But we did get the ballot for the tech school itself, for the borrowing authorization for them to do their project. As a result of that, there will be an additional assessment. And I didn't get a chance this afternoon to kind of check in with Anita, but we talked this morning, and we do have a ballot question wording, and I think we have the warrant in their signature folder for them to...
No.
No. Okay.
No, is it?
I did receive a copy of it, but it was sent to me today just to look over to make sure that the town of Harwich's information was correct on the warrant. And then they sent me a sample of the ballot. And
I
then
mean our warrant.
what I did today, did you not receive it?
I
I
was
sent
out of
it
the-
to
I
s-
was out of the office most of the afternoon.
Oh, my apologies. I sent it to Sandy. I can go downstairs and print it out for you if you'd like me to.
Because if the board wants to sign it, we do have the actual warrant prepared.
Yes,
The language is exactly as was presented by the Rick Manley, the town's bond counsel.
Yes, I prepared the warrant for your signatures tonight if you should so choose to go forward with this ballot. If you'd give me
bear with me, I'll just run downstairs to my office and I can print it out.
Sure, Chris, you want
Yeah,
that?
that would be great, and while Anita's doing that, I'll just kind of walk through. Under Proposition 2.5, they have very specific language that needs to be put into these ballot questions. So the wording that Rick Manley, who's the financial advisor, attorney that's a financial advisor, has recommended in terms of this, shall the town of Harwich be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2 1/2, so-called the amounts required to pay the town's allocable share of the bond issued by the Cape Tech Regional High School District for the purpose of paying costs of designing, constructing, originally equipping, and furnishing a new district high school to be located at 351 Pleasant Lake Ave, Harwich, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto. One of the things, just had a little bit of back and forth. Traditionally, as in the case of, I think in the Monomoy system, you have a dollar amount, you have the assessment, so you have a sense for what it's going to cost. Here, because there's so many different towns and the process for accepting changes builds into the system, where you cannot have a ballot within the ballot to approve the project, how you're going to pay for it. And because there are so many different towns and communities that are part of this, there are going to be some, quite honestly, they only have 2 or 3 kids going, so their assessment is going to be so small that it's going to not be very material to them. However, the town of Barnstable, which has the number 1 for the number of kids in the system, did decide to go to the ballot in September and actually pre-fund or put on the ballot to see if it could pre-fund, because the impact of this financial, this is $685,000 that will be on the tax rolls for 30 years. So this is a significant amount. That's an estimated amount at this point, but I think it's realistic for people to assume. And to me, and this point's already been made, that if we have the ballot for the project, should we have also a ballot for how we're going to pay for it? To me, this is only fair that if you're going to ask people for a project, that you also arrange for the financing to pay for that project, our portion of it. So we do not need to go to town meeting and get an appropriation, because this will be just part of our assessment per the agreement that we have with Cape Cod Tech. But I do think that the board's approval of this language and signing off of the warrant will put, or signing off on the ballot, will put this on. And for educating the voters, that they'll go into the voting place and they'll be presented with 2 ballots, and they'll put it into the same machine. The machine will know how to tabulate the 2 separate ballots, but there will be double check-ins and double check-outs, because it technically is 2 elections being contained in the same one. And this would be run at the coterminous time. I think the other night they said it was 8 hours, from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So we can do 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock to make sure that mirrors up, so people don't have to come back or only vote on one at a different time. So with that being said, I was trying to stretch that out. Oh, she came back.
I just have a quick question, Chris.
Chris, we got a question, Janelle?
What happens if the district approves the tech question, but Harwich votes this debt exclusion down?
This is one where we will have, thank you very much, Anita. We will have 2 opportunities to be able to do it. The big assessment won't come until 2020, so we would have another opportunity to go to the voters. If the voters if the voters do not vote that, then yours truly will have to present a budget plan that we have to pay debt before we pay anything else. So I will have to figure out a way to find $685,000 in the budget to fund that.
Because it's debt.
Because
It's
it's
assessed
debt,
to us no matter what.
yes. It's assessed to us no matter what.
Okay.
So that creates a real point where it would take, most likely, I would go in and reduce the budget to try to meet that. And to get to that amount, bless you, probably does mean bodies.
Means what?
Means bodies, means laying off people in order to get to that level. I don't want to be, it doesn't mean we're going to shut government down. We're not going to have to lay off 50% of the workforce. But to get to $600,000, and when the trouble with getting to that kind of money is when you decide that you're going to lay people off, now you don't get the value of the layoff because now your unemployment costs go up. So you lay somebody off for $60,000, you only get a $20,000 value because you have to put $40,000 in. So when you get into the situation where you want to downsize government, it's a real challenge. So it's important to have this be, if the voters want to have this project, they should also make sure that they pay for the project. And
Janelle, you
I
got a
think
follow-up?
that's critically important.
We're going to be talking with Anita, I assume, in a few minutes, just to figure out if we're going to vote to have this ballot question, correct?
We're gonna have a motion with the board to approve the warrant and the ballot question. But Don, go ahead with a...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's another practical question thing. I mean, I've spent my share of elections as an election worker and as a registrar. And the one thing I know we can bank on with this in its current form is somebody, a lot of somebodies are going to say, how much is this? And the default position for an awful lot of people through the years in borrowings has been, if I'm not real clear about it, I'm turning it down because I don't understand this. Wondering why we couldn't, for the purposes of doing this, have a number that would exceed that, like the estimated cost, $700,000 a year, because absent any language at all, there are going to be people that are going to ask coming in, and the election workers are not going to be allowed to answer that question. They can't.
That was included in Bob Sanborn's presentation, what the average tax bill would be. So we can
14
certainly
cents
make
per
that 14 cents per thousand.
Even if it just said estimated cost.
Yeah, we can make that available on the website. I think that's educational.
His whole proposal we should put on the website.
Put on the website.
Anita?
No, I was just going to say, the language that I had put on the election ballot was exactly what John Giorgio had put forward from bond counsel, verbatim. And my apologies that I did not get it to Chris before this point.
Janelle had a question as well.
Anita, what was the cost for running this, this ballot?
The
to
dual
town?
election, it's, I believe I had said it's going to cost somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000, because what you have to do is, not only am I going to have the programming of one ballot for the machines, they have to program both ballots at the same time. Plus you need it's double election workers, double everything, and it's logistical.
So
why this makes sense to me is, and I think Chris did a good job outlining it, we're asking people to approve a project. At the same time, we really should ask them to approve the money, to avoid them approving the project and coming back 2 years later when we go for bond, the chance of that failing. So it makes sense to, if they're going to vote twice, yes, I support the project, and yes, I support the money. And I think at that point, we're going to know, well, we'll have both answers that day. Most people aren't going to support a project and then vote no on the money. So we're being responsible by giving it to them the same day, in my mind, rather than 2 years later. Janelle?
to your point, most people aren't going to support the project and not support the money. They're also not going to not vote the project and not vote the money. So I feel like this is redundant, and it's going to cost the town $4,000 to $6,000. And I also feel like having the district vote kind of makes us just have to be part of a waiting game and see what happens, because even if Harwich does not vote for the new school, but the other towns do, it's going to happen. So we've just spent $4,000 to $6,000 and all the election workers for nothing. I feel like this is putting the cart before the horse. What we really have to do is wait to see if the district approves the school building. But that's just the way my brain's thinking.
Chris.
I see your point,
Yeah, I
but
think it's a little bit different in my mind, that because we signed up and have an agreement and the state law dictates that, as was indicated last meeting, this election is going forward. So
Right.
the only question is, the timing on when do we want to bring to the voters? Do you tell the voters that you're doing a project that, I think our portion was about $10 million, and we have no plan to pay for it, I think doesn't really present a good message. Or we do the separate ballot that says, here's what the district is doing, here's what the assessment will be, because on their ballot, they do have the amount that the assessment would be for the town of Harwich. So here's a $10 million number, and then the voter can go take the separate ballot and say, this is how I'm gonna pay for it. I think it's in my mind, it's disingenuous to ask somebody to spend $10 million in the town of Harwich and not have a plan for how to pay for it. And what this does, I mean, we don't have $6,000 in Anita's budget, and I will plan on going or send somebody to the Finance Committee on Thursday night. They have a meeting and ask for a reserve fund transfer, because this was an unforeseen circumstance. But to wait 2 years and say, oh, remember what you voted 2 years ago, now we need, a funding mechanism to fund $10 million. I mean, to me, and, I've heard, other towns aren't doing this, other towns are waiting. We're number 3 on the list. Why did Barnstable go now? Because they understand the ramifications of what happens if we don't fund it.
And, yeah, if I may, in my mind, from a practical matter, we have Cape Cod Tech. Bob Sanborn's been on the radio, seems like every day, promoting the Cape Tech school. We'll have advertisements in the paper he's having. I notice we got a list of public meetings. I think we need to do this now. If we do one vote and then come back later for money, people will forget what they're. We'd have to gear up again and try to convince people to vote the money. And now people, all the discussion is now. I think we should go ahead and try to do it when people are thinking about it.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion on this?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the ballot. Am I saying both ballots?
no, because it's just, the district
Additional.
one is not ours.
All right.
It's
The ballot for the debt exclusion for the Cape Cod Tech assessment as worded in this document. Sufficient?
Might I suggest that we want to approve the warrant and a special ballot on October 24th, a special town ballot?
Okay.
So let me just ask, because that motion wasn't seconded, so you can withdraw your
I'll
motion.
withdraw my motion.
Okay. What do you need tonight, Chris? And I want to be sensitive to the fact that the agenda only says approve additional ballot question for Cape Cod Tech.
Yes,
It doesn't say anything about signing the warrant. I know you will.
Yeah.
But we have the warrant in front of us. Can we wait 1 week to sign the warrant, Chris?
Well, I
I don't want to hold anyone up, but if it's an emergency, we'll call it an emergency. But we did only agenda to approve the ballot.
A warrant takes how many days?
well, the warrant and the ballot are one and the same in my mind.
Okay,
correct.
as long as we're covered.
Yeah.
But there's a time frame, though.
Yeah, we have, if we don't have it
To
done
call
by
it.
next week, we have to do it by the 19th.
Don, will you take a stab at the motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the Town of Harwich special election ballot for the purposes of funding the Cape Regional Tech School with the ballot language as provided by Town Council.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4-1, Chris. Okay, next up under new business is refer alleged violation of liquor entertainment license to administrative officer to conduct a hearing. Last year, we had a noise complaint in Harwich Port, and we referred to the process in front of the Board of Selectmen as a very daunting process, almost like a court hearing. Last year, we agreed to refer that to town administration to come back to us with a recommendation. So if it's the board's pleasure, we would defer this to Chris to to have a hearing on this and come back to us with a recommendation.
The form of a hearing?
What's that?
Would that be in the form of a hearing?
Yes.
Yeah, I would conduct the administrative hearing and present the findings.
I move to empower the town administrator to hold such a hearing and then come back with a recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, under new business, is dissolve wastewater implementation committee. We've talked about this for a while. The wastewater implementation committee that we have has fulfilled their charge. We are into the engineering and design phase. We've discussed a new charge for a new wastewater implementation committee, which would be quite different. Larry has been working on that. I did see a draft of that this morning. So we will bring that back probably next week to start a new committee, but one thing we need to do is dissolve the current committee. Larry, do you want to add anything to that?
No, you said it. We're, the committee's been very successful. We have a now CWMP approved by the town meeting or DEP, Cape Cod Commission, and now it needs to move over to more staff activity supported by a committee. So with that, I would move we disband the Harwich Wastewater Implementation Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded to disband or dissolve the wastewater implementation committee. Any discussion? The only thing I would ask is if we could send a letter to each and every member of that committee thanking them for their effort and to where they got us to, and definitely a special thanks to Peter DeBacher, who put a lot of time into this. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Town administrators report.
I'm going to keep this exceptionally brief tonight. I know there was a request, I think there were a couple of requests previously, and one of the ones was a request for building permits over the last 3 years, so that was included under the department reports. But that's the only thing I had. I think that was the only follow-up that I owed the board.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions or comments from the board on the weekly reports?
It was interesting to see the building permits decline. Based on
Gas moratorium?
Yeah, propane, that's what they're using.
Available frontage.
No, just in general, I just thought it was interesting with the real estate, the assessments are up and the market's up, so.
Selectmen's report. Larry?
Nothing.
Julie?
I attended this morning the 9/11 memorial service that the fire department had. It was very nice and important to remember this day because we, as a country, will never forget it. So I appreciate them holding that event.
Janelle?
Just kudos to the Cranberry Harvest and to the Chamber for a great family weekend, both Saturday and Sunday with the beach day and the parade. Thank you.
Don?
I know I eventually will get over bronchitis and get out more, but the only thing I would say is I have a daughter down in South Florida. In addition to me having worked in Lower Manhattan, having a special feeling about 9/11, I also want to have people keep in their thoughts and prayers the folks who are living all the way from the south to the north of Florida, and that they recover soon.
Just to remind the board, the Council on Aging, the new Council on Aging director tomorrow at the Community Center from 2 to 4.
Just one comment to follow Don, because many people remember our former town planner, Sue Levin and Polly Hempstead are in Florida, and they survived. But they send us stuff on Facebook, but they survived.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.